London, 1845. Sophia Northwood clutched the morning edition of the London Gazette so tightly that her knuckles whitened. Her eyes burned with unshed tears as she read the article for the third time, each word cutting deeper than the last. Miss Sophia Northwood, daughter of the late Colonel William Northwood, was observed yesterday at Lady Harrington's soiree engaging in the most peculiar and unladylike behaviour. Sources report the young woman spent the evening discussing political philosophy with gentlemen of the peerage rather than participating in proper dance. More alarming still, she was overheard expressing radical sympathies regarding women's education. One must wonder what respectable gentleman would align himself with such unfeminine notions. The paper trembled in her hands. 6 months in London society, and already she was marked as unsuitable. Sophia crumpled the paper and tossed it into the fireplace, watching as the flames consumed her reputation. "I see you've read it then," her Aunt Harriet remarked coldly from the doorway. "I warned you, Sophia. Your peculiar ideas and stubborn refusal to conform will ruin us both." "I merely suggested that women might benefit from university education," Sophia replied quietly. "Is that truly so radical?" Aunt Harriet sighed. "It matters not what you believe. It matters what others believe of you. We have little enough standing in society after your father's death left us nearly destitute. Your behavior threatens what little security we have managed to retain." Sophia turned toward the window, gazing out at the rain-slicked streets of Mayfair. At 23, she was already considered dangerously close to spinsterhood. Now, with this public censure, her prospects seemed bleaker than ever. "Perhaps I'm not meant for marriage," she murmured. "Nonsense," Aunt Harriet replied sharply. "We shall simply need to find a gentleman who values your unique qualities. Or at the very least, one desperate enough to overlook them." 3 weeks later, Sophia found herself in the grand ballroom of the Huntington estate, pressed against the wall like a shadow, watching the revelry with detached interest. The scandal had cooled somewhat, but she remained an object of whispers and sidelong glances. "You appear to be hiding, Miss Northwood," came a deep voice beside her. Sophia turned, startled to find herself face to face with a tall gentleman she did not recognize. He was handsome in a severe way, sharp cheekbones, penetrating grey eyes, and dark hair streaked prematurely with silver at the temples. His evening attire was impeccable, but there was something in his bearing that suggested he was as uncomfortable in this setting as she. "Not hiding, sir," she replied. "Merely observing. And you have me at a disadvantage." A slight smile touched his lips. "James Xavier, Duke of Westmoreland." Sophia felt herself pale slightly. The Duke of Westmoreland was notorious, a reclusive widower who rarely appeared in society. Rumours abounded about his 5-year absence from London after his wife's death. "Your Grace," she managed, dropping into a curtsy. "I'm surprised you know who I am. The woman who scandalized Lady Harrington's soiree by suggesting that feminine minds might be capable of understanding Plato? I should think everyone knows who you are, Miss Northwood." There was no mockery in his tone, only a curious intensity that made her breath catch. "Then I'm surprised you'd risk your reputation by speaking with me," she replied. "I found reputation to be a poor measure of character," he said. "Besides, I've recently returned to society after years of absence. What do I care for gossip?" Before Sophia could respond, the orchestra struck up a waltz. The Duke extended his hand. "Would you do me the honor, Miss Northwood?" Every instinct told Sophia to decline. Dancing with the Duke would only invite more scrutiny. And yet, something in his gaze, a recognition, perhaps, made her place her gloved hand in his. "People will talk," she warned as he led her to the floor. "Let them," he replied simply. As they joined the dancers, Sophia felt the weight of 100 stares. The mysterious Duke of Westmoreland dancing with the infamous Miss Northwood, it would be in tomorrow's Gazette, without question. "You dance well for a blue stocking," he remarked, his hand firm at her waist. "And you converse well for a recluse," she countered. A genuine smile transformed his face. "Touché, Miss Northwood. I believe we may understand one another." The waltz ended too quickly, and as he escorted her from the floor, the Duke surprised her by asking, would you walk with me in the garden? The night air might be refreshing after the crush. It was improper, of course, but Sophia found herself nodding. I should inform my aunt. Of course, he replied. I shall await you by the terrace doors. Minutes later, they strolled among the Huntingtons' illuminated garden paths. Lanterns hung from the trees, casting golden light across the manicured hedges. The night air was cool against Sophia's flushed cheeks. You must wonder why I singled you out tonight, the Duke said after a comfortable silence. The thought had crossed my mind, she admitted. He stopped beside a marble fountain, the moonlight silvering his profile. I read about your indiscretion. I was intrigued. Most young ladies of society concern themselves solely with fashion and finding husbands. You speak of education and philosophy. To my detriment, it seems. Perhaps. His eyes met hers. Or perhaps not. Tell me, Miss Northwood, what do you read? The question delighted her. For the next quarter hour, they discussed literature with an ease that Sophia had never experienced with any gentleman of her acquaintance. The Duke was well-read, thoughtful, and, most surprisingly, interested in her opinions. My late wife enjoyed reading, he said suddenly, his expression clouding. Though she preferred poetry to philosophy. Sophia's heart quickened at this personal revelation. I'm sorry for your loss, Your Grace. James, he corrected quietly. When we speak of books and ideas, I'd prefer you call me James. That would be highly inappropriate, she whispered, though the intimacy of his request thrilled her. As inappropriate as our entire conversation, I imagine. His smile was tinged with sadness. Forgive me. I've been away from society too long. I've forgotten its strictures. I envy your freedom from them, she confessed. A sound from nearby made them both turn. Lady Prescott, one of London's most notorious gossips, stood watching them with undisguised interest. It seems we've been discovered, the Duke murmured. May I call on you tomorrow, Miss Northwood? I find I wish to continue our conversation. Sophia hesitated only briefly before nodding. Yes, Your Grace. I should like that very much. The Duke's carriage arrived precisely at 2 o'clock the following afternoon. Aunt Harriet was beside herself with excitement. A Duke! And a wealthy one at that, she whispered urgently as they awaited his entrance. Sophia, you must not ruin this opportunity with your peculiar notions. He seems to appreciate my peculiar notions, Sophia replied, though anxiety fluttered in her stomach. Had she imagined the connection between them? When the Duke was shown in, Sophia was struck again by his commanding presence. He bowed formally over her hand, then Aunt Harriet's, before settling into conversation with the practiced ease of his station. Yet Sophia noticed how his gaze continually returned to her, as if drawn by some invisible force. After the requisite half-hour of polite conversation, during which Aunt Harriet extolled Sophia's domestic virtues while carefully avoiding mention of her intellectual pursuits, the Duke suggested a turn about the small garden behind the townhouse. Aunt Harriet agreed with suspicious alacrity. Your aunt is determined to see you married, the Duke observed as they strolled between the rosebushes. Sophia flushed. She means well. My father's death left us in difficult circumstances. And you believe marriage is the solution? She considered his question carefully. For a woman of limited means and unlimited opinions? Society certainly thinks so. The Duke stopped, turning to face her fully. And what does Sophia Northwood think? I think... She began, then faltered. I think I should like a partnership of minds. But such matches are rare, especially for women like me. Women like you. Difficult women. Opinionated women. Women who read Plato instead of practicing the pianoforte. A smile touched his lips. I find such women infinitely preferable to those whose accomplishments are purchased through rote memorization rather than genuine interest. Then you are as unusual among gentlemen as I am among ladies, she replied. Perhaps that is why I sought you out. His grey eyes held hers. Miss Northwood, I wonder if you might consider visiting Westmoreland House tomorrow. I have a library that might interest you, and my sister Lady Eleanor will be present as chaperone. The invitation was unexpected and thrilling. I should like that very much, Your Grace. James, he reminded her softly. James, she echoed, the name feeling intimate on her lips. Neither noticed Lady Prescott passing on the street outside, observing their tete-a-tete with narrowed eyes. The following morning brought another article in the Gazette, this one positioned prominently on the society page. The enigmatic Duke of Westmoreland was observed in close conversation with Miss Sophia Northwood, whose radical opinions regarding female education previously caused such consternation. One wonders what attracts the reclusive peer to the controversial Miss Northwood. Could it be true that His Grace harbours similar progressive sympathies? Or perhaps the rumours regarding his first marriage, and its tragic conclusion, offer a more troubling explanation for his unusual choice of companion. What does it mean? Sophia asked, her voice trembling as she set down the paper. What rumours about his marriage? Aunt Harriet looked uncomfortable. There was talk, after the Duchess died, that their marriage had been difficult. Some suggested he had driven her to melancholy with his strict and controlling nature. Others whispered of more sinister circumstances surrounding her death. You cannot believe that, Sophia gasped. I believe nothing without evidence, Aunt Harriet replied. But it explains his withdrawal from society. And perhaps his interest in you, my dear. What do you mean? Her aunt's expression softened with pity. A conventional beauty might remind him too much of his late wife. You, with your unusual ideas and forthright manner, represent something entirely different. The word stung, though Sophia knew her aunt hadn't intended cruelty. Was that truly why the Duke had singled her out? Because she was different enough from his wife to be safe? Despite her misgivings, Sophia found herself in the Duke's carriage that afternoon, headed toward Westmoreland House. The grand residence stood in dignified isolation on Berkeley Square, its Portland stone facade gleaming in the afternoon sun. Inside, the Duke himself greeted her, alongside a striking woman with the same penetrating grey eyes. Miss Northwood, may I present my sister, Lady Eleanor Xavier, he said formally. Lady Eleanor's smile was warm, if assessing. My brother speaks highly of you, Miss Northwood. He tells me you share his love of literature. Your brother is too kind, Sophia replied carefully. Though I do enjoy reading when time permits. Come, the Duke said. Let me show you the library. The library of Westmoreland House took Sophia's breath away. 2 stories tall with a gallery running around the upper level, it contained more books than she had ever seen outside of a public institution. Leather-bound volumes lined every wall, and comfortable reading chairs were positioned near tall windows that flooded the space with light. It's magnificent, she whispered, moving instinctively toward the nearest shelf. The Duke watched her with evident pleasure. My grandfather began the collection. My father expanded it. I've added what I can. You've read all these? She asked, running her fingers along the spines. Many, though not all. Some are in languages I haven't mastered. He moved closer, reaching past her to pull down a volume. This might interest you. Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Woman. Controversial, but compelling. Sophia accepted the book with trembling hands. You've read this? I have. I found her arguments persuasive, if sometimes flawed. Lady Eleanor laughed softly from the doorway. James has always had unconventional ideas about women's capabilities. Our father despaired of him ever finding a suitable wife. And yet I did marry, the Duke reminded her, a shadow crossing his face. Yes, Lady Eleanor replied, her smile fading. You did. An uncomfortable silence fell. Sophia clutched the book to her chest, suddenly aware of the undercurrent she couldn't understand. Miss Northwood, Lady Eleanor said finally, would you care to see the conservatory while the tea is prepared? Grateful for the diversion, Sophia agreed. As they walked through the elegant hallways, Lady Eleanor spoke casually of the house's history and her brother's recent improvements. Then, as they entered the sunlit conservatory, her tone changed. "I should tell you, Miss Northwood, that I am pleased my brother has taken an interest in you." Sophia blushed. "Lady Eleanor, I wouldn't presume, no, of course not. But I've known James all his life. He doesn't extend himself to others without good reason." She hesitated. "I'm sure you've heard rumors about his first marriage." "I try not to give credence to gossip," Sophia replied diplomatically. "A wise policy, but in this case, I think you should know the truth." Lady Eleanor gestured to a bench surrounded by exotic ferns. "Please, sit with me." Once they were seated, Lady Eleanor continued, her voice low but clear. "My brother's wife, Caroline, was beautiful, accomplished, and utterly conventional. Their marriage was arranged by our father to unite our estate with her family's. James did his duty, but there was never love between them." "I'm sorry to hear that," Sophia murmured. Caroline found country life tedious. She preferred London and its diversions. James indulged her with seasonal visits, but eventually discovered she was carrying on affairs with at least 2 gentlemen of her acquaintance. Sophia's eyes widened. This was not the story she had expected. Rather than expose her to scandal, he confronted her privately. They agreed to live separately while maintaining appearances. Shortly thereafter, she became ill with consumption and died within months. Lady Eleanor's eyes glistened. James blamed himself. He thought the stress of their confrontation had weakened her constitution. He withdrew from society entirely, burying himself in books and estate management. "How terrible for him," Sophia whispered. "Yes. The irony is that society blamed him for her unhappiness, when in truth, he had only ever treated her with respect and dignity, despite her betrayal." Lady Eleanor took Sophia's hand. "I tell you this because I've seen how he looks at you. There is a connection between you that he never had with Caroline. But he will never speak of his feelings if he believes you think ill of him." Before Sophia could respond, a footman appeared to announce that tea was served. As they rejoined the Duke in the drawing room, Sophia found herself studying him with new eyes. The sadness she had glimpsed made perfect sense now, not guilt for causing his wife's death, but regret for a marriage that had brought neither of them happiness. Over tea, they discussed books and ideas with growing animation. The Duke, James, as she now thought of him, challenged her opinions without dismissing them, argued points with passion but without condescension, and listened to her responses with genuine interest. "You see, Eleanor," he said at one point, eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Miss Northwood understands precisely what Locke intended with his theory of natural rights." "Indeed," Lady Eleanor replied with a knowing smile. "How fortunate you found someone who shares your intellectual interests." As the afternoon drew to a close, James escorted Sophia to his carriage. "I hope you'll visit again," he said. "Perhaps next week? Eleanor is hosting a small musical evening. Nothing elaborate, just a few friends who appreciate good conversation as well as good music." "I should like that very much," Sophia replied, her heart pounding at the warmth in his eyes. He hesitated, then added softly, "I find myself looking forward to our conversations more than anything else in my day." The simple confession made her breath catch. "As do I." As the carriage pulled away, Sophia gazed back at the Duke standing on the steps of Westmoreland House. For the first time since arriving in London, she felt a sense of possibility unfurling within her. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of visits and conversations. Sophia attended Lady Eleanor's musical evening, where she was introduced to a small circle of intellectuals and artists who treated her ideas with respect rather than shock. The Duke called regularly at Aunt Harriet's townhouse, bringing books he thought might interest Sophia and engaging her in discussions that often lasted until propriety demanded his departure. London society watched their growing attachment with a mixture of fascination and disapproval. The Gazette published increasingly speculative pieces about the Duke's intentions, questioning whether he truly meant to offer for the blue-stocking spinsters or merely found her an amusing diversion. "You shouldn't read those rags," James told her one afternoon as they walked in Hyde Park, Lady Eleanor following at a discreet distance. "They understand nothing of what matters." And what does matter? Sophia asked, her heart quickening at the intensity of his gaze. Connection. Understanding. The rare pleasure of finding someone whose mind complements your own. He paused. Sophia, well. What an unexpected pleasure. The strident voice cut through the moment like a knife. Lady Prescott approached with her daughter in tow, her smile sharp as broken glass. Your Grace. Miss Northwood. How fortunate to encounter you both again. Her eyes flicked meaningfully between them. I was just telling my dear Charlotte how educational it is to observe unusual pairings in society. It teaches one so much about human nature. James stiffened beside Sophia. Lady Prescott. Miss Prescott. Good day to you both. I wonder, Your Grace, Lady Prescott continued, ignoring his cold tone, if you've read this morning's Gazette. There's a most interesting piece about your father's progressive views on estate management. So like your own progressive inclinations in other matters. Sophia felt James's hand tighten on her arm. I find most periodicals more concerned with sensation than substance, he replied evenly. Now, if you'll excuse us, of course, Lady Prescott simpered. Though I should mention, Duke, that Lord Talbot was asking after you at Lady Melbourne's dinner last evening. Something about your late wife's brother having returned from the continent with interesting news. James went utterly still. Richard has returned to London. So Lord Talbot said. Arrived just yesterday, I believe. Lady Prescott's smile was venomous. I'm sure he'll be eager to renew your acquaintance. After Lady Prescott departed, James remained silent, his expression shuttered in a way Sophia had never seen. James? Is something wrong? He seemed to return from some distance. Forgive me. Richard Harlow, my late wife's brother, and I have a complicated history. I hadn't expected his return. Is it troubling news? Potentially. He glanced at Lady Eleanor, who had moved closer with a concerned expression. Eleanor, perhaps we should return Miss Northwood to her aunt's home. Of course, Lady Eleanor replied, her voice tight with worry. As they walked toward the carriage, Sophia felt a sudden chill. The easy companionship of moments before had vanished, replaced by a tension she didn't understand. At her door, James bowed over her hand. I must beg your forgiveness, Sophia. There are matters I need to attend to immediately. Of course, she replied, though anxiety twisted in her stomach. Will I see you tomorrow? Something flickered in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or fear. I hope so. There is much I wish to say to you. As his carriage pulled away, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had changed. That night, she slept fitfully, dreaming of grey eyes filled with unspoken sorrow. The following morning brought neither James nor any message from him. By afternoon, Sophia's anxiety had grown into genuine concern. She was considering the propriety of sending a note when Aunt Harriet burst into the sitting room, her face ashen. Sophia! Have you seen this? She thrust a copy of the Gazette into Sophia's hands. The headline made Sophia's blood run cold. Death of a Duchess questioned, brother of late Duchess of Westmoreland suggests foul play. The article beneath was worse than she could have imagined. Mr. Richard Harlow, brother of the late Caroline Harlow Xavier, Duchess of Westmoreland, has returned to London with shocking allegations regarding his sister's demise 5 years ago. Mr. Harlow claims to possess letters written by the Duchess shortly before her death, expressing fear of her husband and concern for her safety. My sister was not consumptive, Mr. Harlow stated to this publication. She was in perfect health until her marriage grew strained. I believe the Duke's account of her illness was fabricated to conceal a more sinister truth. Mr. Harlow has indicated he intends to present his evidence to the authorities. Sophia's hands trembled so violently that the paper fell to the floor. This cannot be true, she whispered. True or not, it's disastrous, Aunt Harriet replied. Sophia, you must distance yourself from the Duke immediately. This scandal will destroy anyone associated with him. I cannot believe James would harm anyone, Sophia said, rising to her feet. Lady Eleanor told me about his marriage. Caroline was unfaithful. They had agreed to live separately. And you believe that account? Aunt Harriet asked, her voice gentler now. My dear, people often present themselves in the most favorable light. I must speak with him, Sophia insisted. That would be most unwise, her aunt cautioned. If these allegations have substance, then he needs someone who believes in him more than ever, Sophia finished firmly. I'm going to Westmoreland House. Aunt Harriet's protests followed her up the stairs as she went to change. An hour later, Sophia sat in a hired hackney, heart pounding as it approached Berkeley Square. She had no appointment, no proper chaperone, nothing but the conviction that the man she had come to care for deeply deserved at least the chance to defend himself. The butler who answered her knock looked harried and suspicious. His Grace is not receiving visitors, miss. Please, Sophia pressed, tell him Miss Northwood is here on a matter of great importance. The butler hesitated, then grudgingly showed her to a small anteroom before disappearing into the house. Long minutes passed before the door opened again, but it was Lady Eleanor who entered, her face drawn with exhaustion. Miss Northwood. This is unexpected. I've seen the Gazette, Sophia said without preamble. I had to come. Lady Eleanor sank into a chair. James cannot see you. He believes it best if you're not associated with him during this difficulty. I don't care about association, Sophia insisted. I care about him. Lady Eleanor studied her intently. You believe in his innocence. I do. Without question. Why? The question was direct, searching. Sophia didn't hesitate. Because I know his character. I've seen his gentleness, his respect for others, his fundamental decency. I cannot reconcile the man I know with these terrible allegations. Something in Lady Eleanor's expression softened. Wait here. She left Sophia alone with her racing thoughts. The minutes stretched interminably until the door finally opened again. James stood there, looking as though he hadn't slept. His cravat was loosened, his hair disheveled, his eyes haunted. He stared at Sophia as if she were a mirage. You shouldn't be here, he said hoarsely. Where else would I be, she replied simply. He crossed to her then, taking her hands in his. Sophia, you don't understand. Richard Harlow has manufactured evidence against me. Letters Caroline supposedly wrote, describing me as controlling, even threatening. He claims she feared for her life. I don't believe it, Sophia said fiercely. The authorities may. Especially given the rumors that have circulated for years. His grip tightened. I cannot ask you to stand with me through this. Your reputation, I don't care about my reputation, she interrupted. James, tell me the truth. All of it. He released her hands and moved to the window, gazing out at the square. Caroline and I were ill-suited from the beginning. She wanted society, excitement. I preferred quieter pursuits. When I discovered her affairs, I confronted her, but not in anger. I proposed we live apart while maintaining appearances. Lady Eleanor told me this much, Sophia said gently. He nodded. What Eleanor doesn't know is that Caroline agreed readily, too readily. She seemed almost relieved. A month later, she became ill. The doctors diagnosed consumption. She declined rapidly, and his voice broke. She asked to see me on her deathbed. Asked my forgiveness for being a poor wife. I gave it freely, of course. She died that night. And now her brother claims it wasn't consumption at all. James turned back to face her, his expression anguished. Richard always resented me. He'd expected to benefit financially from Caroline's marriage, but I refused to support his gambling habits. Now he's returned with these fabricated letters, claiming I somehow caused Caroline's death. It's absurd, but the scandal alone could ruin me. There must be a way to prove the letters are forgeries, Sophia insisted. My solicitor is working on it. Caroline's lady's maid, who was with her throughout her illness, has agreed to provide a statement contradicting Richard's claims. But these things take time, and meanwhile... He gestured helplessly. My name is being dragged through the mud, and anyone associated with me will suffer the same fate. Sophia moved toward him, stopping just short of touching his face. Then we will weather it together. I cannot ask that of you. You didn't ask. I offered. She held his gaze steadily. James, these past weeks have been the happiest of my life. For the first time, I felt truly seen and valued for who I am. I won't abandon that, or you, because of malicious lies. Something broke in his expression then, a wall crumbling to reveal the raw emotion beneath. Sophia, he whispered, I have fallen completely in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Sophia felt tears spring to her eyes. And I with you. He reached for her then, drawing her into his arms with exquisite gentleness. I had planned to court you properly. To ask for your hand when enough time had passed. Now I fear I've brought only trouble into your life. You've brought meaning, she corrected softly. Purpose. Joy? His forehead rested against hers. If you stand by me through this, society will never forgive either of us, whether I'm exonerated or not. Then we shall create our own society, she replied, filled with people who value truth and character over gossip and conformity. A tentative smile touched his lips. Beginning with my sister, who I believe is listening at the door. The door opened immediately to reveal an unrepentant Lady Eleanor. Someone had to ensure propriety was maintained, she said with dignity, though her eye sparkled with approval. Miss Northwood, I believe you've won my eternal admiration. And my heart, James added softly, his gaze never leaving Sophia's face. The next weeks tested their resolve severely. Richard Harlowe's allegations grew increasingly outlandish as he played to the scandal-hungry press. Former servants were paid to corroborate his stories of the Duke's supposed cruelty. Society divided into factions, with the majority choosing to believe the worst. Through it all, Sophia remained steadfastly at James's side. She accompanied Lady Eleanor on visits to his solicitor, helped examine Caroline's actual correspondence for evidence of her true state of mind, and endured the cutting remarks and social ostracism that came with her loyalty to a man under such a cloud. Aunt Harriet, after initial resistance, became an unexpected ally. If you're determined to ruin yourself for this man, she declared, then I shall be ruined alongside you. Family stands together. The tide began to turn when Caroline's lady's maid, Mrs. Porter, provided a sworn statement detailing the Duchess's long illness and the Duke's attentive care during her final days. Several physicians who had attended Caroline came forward to confirm their diagnosis of consumption. Most damning for Richard, the family solicitor produced documentation showing that Richard had recently amassed substantial gambling debts to a dangerous creditor, providing a compelling motive for his sudden discovery of evidence against his wealthy brother-in-law. The decisive blow came when Lady Eleanor, searching through old correspondence, found letters from Caroline to a childhood friend. In them, Caroline admitted her affairs and expressed gratitude for the Duke's discretion in allowing her to live separately without public scandal. Most significantly, she mentioned feeling unwell months before her diagnosis, describing symptoms consistent with the early stages of consumption. With this evidence, James's solicitor confronted Richard Harlowe privately. Faced with exposure of his own crimes, forgery and attempted extortion, Richard hastily retracted his allegations and departed for the continent once more. The Gazette, ever mindful of selling papers, published a full retraction and apology to the Duke. Society, fickle as always, began to welcome him back, though with a new wariness, as if uncertain which version of him to believe. Through it all, James and Sophia grew closer, their bond tempered by adversity into something unbreakable. When the worst of the scandal had passed, James invited Sophia and Aunt Harriet to Westmoreland House for dinner. Lady Eleanor welcomed them warmly, but soon made excuses to escort Aunt Harriet to the conservatory, leaving James and Sophia alone in the library where they had first connected over books and ideas. "I've been thinking," James said, taking her hands in his, "about what you said when this nightmare began. About creating our own society." "I remember," she replied softly. I want that, Sophia. A life filled with people who value substance over appearance, truth over convenience. He drew a small velvet box from his pocket. But most of all, I want a life with you. He opened the box to reveal a sapphire ring surrounded by diamonds. This was my grandmother's. She was also considered somewhat unusual for her time, educated, opinionated, determined. My grandfather adored her for it. His eyes met Sophia's. Will you marry me, Sophia? Not despite your differences from other women, but because of them. Tears blurred Sophia's vision as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. With all my heart, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms. Society may never fully accept us, he murmured against her hair. Then society's loss is our gain, she replied, lifting her face to his. For I would rather be scorned with you than celebrated without you. His kiss was gentle at first, then deepening with promise, a pledge of understanding, respect, and love that transcended the narrow confines of society's approval. They were married that autumn at Westmoreland's country estate, surrounded not by the glittering aristocracy, but by those who had stood by them through scandal, Lady Eleanor, Aunt Harriet, James's loyal staff, and a small circle of friends who valued character over conformity. The London Gazette reported the marriage with grudging respect, noting that the Duke and his unconventional Duchess planned to divide their time between London and the country, where the Duchess would assist in establishing a school that would offer education to girls of all social classes. In their library at Westmoreland House, the Duke and Duchess added volumes on education reform alongside philosophy and poetry. In time, their discussions would be joined by the voices of their children, 2 sons and a daughter, all raised to value intellect, integrity, and the courage to stand apart when principle demanded it. And if society occasionally whispered about the strange match between the Duke and his blue-stocking wife, neither of them particularly cared. For in each other, they had found something far more valuable than social approval, they had found home.